Thing, Dolores Elliott, and we have a show and tell for you, so that's why we've asked for people to be up front here. And we're also very lucky to have Becca in the room in the back because she's showing this on Zoom and also will be taping this. So welcome and enjoy.
Thanks for coming. I was so happy to be asked to interview Dolores today. She's a very special and interesting person, and I'm happy to call her a good friend of mine, too. I've known her for 20-plus years through UUCB, and we've had many, many adventures together. We've traveled, had holidays together, lots of discussions, and lots of laughs and tears together. So I know every time I spend some time with Dolores, I learn something new about her. So you're in for a real treat today. Dolores is a world traveler, a trivia expert, a world-renowned expert on Iroquois beadwork, a collector extraordinaire, and has done countless lectures, TV interviews, written books, and had museum exhibits. And she's married to one of the best guys I know. You'll be so glad you came to hear about her interesting life. So you want to start at the beginning?
At the beginning. Well, thank you very much for coming. I don't know whether I have any wisdom to share, but I may entertain you with some of the adventures that I've had. And I want to really appreciate and thank Carol for thinking that I might have something interesting to say. I hope I do. You want me to start on May 13th, 1942?
Well, you probably don't remember that. Start where you remember.
I remember the stories that on that Wednesday when I was born, my father was at a Masonic meeting. My father had meetings almost every night of the week. If it's not Dairymen's League, it was elder at the church or school board. He was on the school board for the whole 13 years I was in school, so I never got into trouble, of course. Tom's going to pass out a couple pictures of me when I was the pampered little daughter of my parents. My four brothers were off at World War II when I was of age, when I was a toddler. Two were in the Army, two were in the Navy. They all came home. And everyone was thankful for that. I was, as you can see, the only child of my mother. My brother's mother had died when they were all young. So I was sort of treated like a pampered little girl. My mother's only child, my father's only daughter. And I got most everything I wanted. The biggest thing that I asked for was a horse. And I got my first riding horse when I was 10. And I've had horses almost all of my life until I was 70. So I had at least one horse for 60 years. And there is a picture of my first one. Tom has two pictures to pass out, both on the dairy farm where I grew up.
Where was that?
Which
farm, what do you want?
Both of them.
Oh, both.
One of them has a picture of Silver, my first horse, in it. I grew up on a dairy farm in Bainbridge, southern Shenango County. It was an idyllic life. When I was young, my father took me for walks in the woods, teaching me about the trees and the plants and the animals, how to love the natural world. My mother taught me the names of the birds and the songs that they sang, and all of the flowers in her various flower gardens. There are a couple big barns, the horse barn and the cow barn. And in addition, on the back of the cow barn is where my father kept 1,500 chickens, 500 on each of the floors. Spring chickens came every spring. And one of the earliest jobs I had as a little girl was after school, I had to weigh each egg and put it in the appropriate space in the egg cartons. You know, they're small, medium, large, and extra large. I handled tens of thousands of eggs.
That's something I never heard.
And because I was on a dairy farm, I raised my Holstein calves, and one of them was really good and got to go to the state fair. And at the state fair, where I lived in the 4-H dormitory, and the 4-H dormitory is right next to the Indian village. And I would go down and spend time with the people there, and bought, oh dear, my first piece of beadwork. Where did it go? There it is. The first piece of Iroquois beadwork I bought in 1958. I bought it as a present for my mother. And 30 or 40 years later, a Tuscarora friend was visiting me one weekend and was going through my collection of beadwork, and she recognized it as one that she had made. We were both teenagers at the state fair in 1958. Oh, there's a picture of her on my exhibit that's at Robertson Center now, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. So, school's next, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I've divided my life into 6 subjects. And I really appreciate Carol asking me to do this, because it was really, really nice to be able to, and fulfilling to look back over, 83 years and see the various periods that I went into. And of course, I went to school, Bainbridge School, graduated in 1960, and women were still women then, separated from men. And my graduation speech was defending my choice of a liberal arts school because I could be a better conversationalist with my husband. I really had to argue with the coach who was the person you talked to about
Counselor.
college. Counselor, yeah, guidance counselor. He thought I should go to a college to learn to be something much more practical than conversationalist for my husband. So I went to Hoppa College here on scholarship and graduated in '64 with a major in anthropology. I've always been interested in people and how they do things. And my mother always bought those big Time Life books about places around the world, still got those great books. And I've always had an interest in how people can do great things differently. A month after I graduated, I took an archaeological field school by the state archaeologist. I worked all summer on a big 500-year-old Mohawk village up in the Adirondacks. And it's really funny, just recently I heard that a Mohawk girl that I met in one of my powwows that I put on when she was a little girl, she is now using the clay that was used 500 years ago in making pottery. So they're doing all sorts of experiments at the State Museum with her techniques as compared to the sherds that we excavated back at Garoga. And I just love to see the past and the present combined to show that we're all the same no matter where we live. Another thing, when I was in school, every Saturday night, my mother went to her mimeograph and ran off the programs for church, Presbyterian church, the next morning. And she had a special room, lots of rooms in our house, but in the mimeograph room was a chest with a box in it. And the box contained all this beautiful, shiny, slippery flint tools, projectile points. Remember, we don't call them arrowheads because only the last 1,000 years have we had bows and arrows. Previous to that, there were spears and darts. So I didn't know that then. I didn't know what archaeology was back then. But I was really wanted to know who made those and why and how long ago it was. So back, when I was in high school, at the tune of the mimeograph going, I could look at those stones, which my grandfather had picked up in his garden on the bank of the Susquehanna River up in Bainbridge. So we know people, we've known people who have lived here for something like 13,000 years, but I didn't know that then, of course. So the state archaeologists told me that there's going to be a conference next year, 1965, annual conference of the New York State Archaeological Association. He invited me to go, and I went. And that was 60 years ago. And next month, I'll go to my 60th meeting of the New York State Archaeological Association. And I'm chairing the main talk on Saturday afternoon. And I'm in charge of the exhibit book room. I've got Syracuse University Press coming, and 3 of my Iroquois or Haudenosaunee artists are going to set up their booths too. And so the first weekend in May will be a fun time in Niagara Falls at my 60th meeting of the New York State Archaeological Association. And speaking of 60th, my wedding anniversary will be in June. Tom and I have been married for 60 years too. The year after my field school, I got hired to work on the survey of the proposed Route 17. The idea was to find any archaeological sites that might be destroyed by highway construction. So Tom came and we spent our first anniversary out west of western New York State, where I was doing archaeology. The next year, one thing is the director of the Western New York archaeology was Dr. Marion White, and she was the first female archaeologist in New York State. And working on this survey made me the second archaeologist to work in New York State. Now, probably half of the archaeologists are female. Another memory that I got was that at Hoppa College in the 60s, girls had to wear skirts to class, could not wear pants. And we had to be in our dorm rooms at 10:30 for a room check. Couldn't live off campus. No co-ed dorms. You know, I can still remember, there was a man visiting for some reason. Man on the floor, man on the floor. How times have changed in so few years. What's next?
Well, you got your degree in archaeology.
Oh, in
and so,
69, yeah. I worked
other
full-time in
projects.
67 and 68. I excavated a large site in Tioga County. I worked practically 7 days a week for those 2 years. And then in 69, I got my master's. I don't know when I had time to do any academic work when I'm digging 7 days a week, but I did.
Snow days meant you studied.
What?
Snow days meant you studied.
Oh, snow days, right. Had so few of them in the summer, though. Okay. In 1970, I decided I did not want a PhD. I wanted a homestead. And so Tom and I designed a house, a rather different house, found some land up on top of a hill, and had a house built. And it's so different that there was even a newspaper article about no place to hide in the Elliott home. 1971 was a lot of things happened in 1971. In April, we moved into our new house, and in May, our son, Christopher Thomas Elliott, was born. For the next 8 months, he and I were inseparable because Chris never had a bottle. He was breastfed for his first 8 years, right, 8 months of his life when he went to a sippy cup like that. He now lives in Massachusetts as a teacher of English as a second language, and he's also a singer, songwriter, and artist. He's a very talented person. He graduated salutatorian of his class at Johnson City. I don't know how many hundreds there were there. When he followed in his father's step, he was salutatorian of his big school in Michigan. I was salutatorian of mine, but there's only 38 kids in the Bainbridge School.
So where was Chris when you were doing all this excavations?
Well, he was with me most of the time. That goes to the next subject of, I heard that there was something going on where they're building the rest stop north of Binghamton on I-81. And so I drove over there, and I remember Chris was in this little wire baby carrier. They didn't have baby seats back in the 70s. So he was there, and I went into the construction area, and I got out of the car, and there were 2 large stone pestles lying right there. They were really rare. And then there was artifacts all over the place. So then I had to organize a salvage excavation of that site. And I got the Department of Transportation to redesign part of the excavation. There are drainage fields. I had them move it over. So there's part of the village site still there. So if somebody wanted to go find out more about that village than what we excavated there, it's preserved like it should be. I got the idea that from my research, it was an 18th century village that was settled in 1753 by some Nanticoke refugees from down south. And I got the idea we could make some sort of an educational center out of it. So the bicentennial was coming up, And the Broome County American Revolution Bicentennial Commission was given $13,000 from the county, I guess. And I talked them out of $10,000 of that to build this educational center. And the Nimmelsburg Rotary Club built a glass-sided building. And my friends and I built a model of an archaeological site by putting stains in the ground and fired rock and stuff. And then we had a garden of the corn, beans, and squash, the three sustainers of the Haudenosaunee culture. And so during the bicentennial, when it was still a comfort site, a rest stop, people could learn more about the natives of the area. And in January of '76, the Atsaningo building and program moved to Robertson. And I was at Robertson for 13 years. I put together the Atsaningo Powwow, which went for 25 years until getting 200 volunteers every year was too much, and I didn't have that much energy anymore. After 13 years at Robertson, I moved it down to the Waterman Conservation Center at a time when the director of Robertson didn't want to have an Indian program anymore, but Waterman did. And I stayed there for several years until the staff decided that they didn't like the way it was run, and so we quit and left the Waterman Center. It's really great now. You know, got a good director and good programs at Waterman now. And then I brought the Atsaningo program home. Atsaningo became a big part of my life. Even the license plate on my car is Atsaningo.
How about church? What were you raised as, and how did you come to the UUCB?
I was raised in the Bainbridge Presbyterian Church. As I said, my mother did the bulletins, so we had to go to church early every Sunday to pass out the bulletins. I had pretty good attendance. I've got all these pins for perfect attendance. And spent, well, I don't know how many years, several years arguing with whoever the teacher was. I didn't believe what, was being taught me. And we didn't go to church when we first got married, but when Chris got to be old enough to know something more, we went to one of the local Presbyterian churches in Endwell, and I went to a bunch of classes there, and the minister there handed out cards, 3x5 cards, and we were to answer questions. This is one class I remember, and his question was, "Who's Jesus Christ?" And I wrote on it, a well-known teacher, born about 3 BC, died about 30 AD, traveled in the area where he lived, and when the minister was going through what's this Unitarian Universalist answer? And I also knew Margaret Jackson and Penny O'Brien from this church, because I was on the Board of Women Voters, Board of Directors.
League of Women.
League of Women Voters, right, at the time, and I knew them through there. I had a couple other classes like that, and I got a letter from the minister saying, "I think you'd be happier being a Unitarian Universalist." So I got kicked out of the Presbyterian Church.
This is where you belong.
So I came here, and it was about 1980, was it? it was just as the split was being healed, and Michael Schuler came.
First experiences were with the fellowship down at the Lions.
Yeah, we went down to the fellowship a bit, and then when Michael Schuler came, we were here for him, really liked him. And he's written some good books, too. I see him on the internet. He's still in Madison, Wisconsin, but retired.
I know you've done a lot of traveling, you and Tom together, so I'm going to talk a little bit about where you've been.
Well, when we decided to have a homestead, instead of, a big career in archaeology, we had my horses. Tom built a barn and got chickens. Oh, and Tom has the aerial picture of our homestead. It shows one of my first horses, not the same Silver from before, but this guy's registration name was Rock of Gibraltar, and I called him Rocky. And he is buried there on our homestead, along with his mother and a couple other horses that I've had over the years. So we've been to all 50 states. I like to visit archaeological and historic sites. And we've been to 25 other countries. We've been on the Great Wall of China, seen the terracotta soldiers, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, the pyramids, of course, Stonehenge, Red Square, St. Petersburg, Orkney Islands. Oh, because people know me all over the world practically about Iroquois beadwork, I did get a request from a museum on the Orkney Islands with a question about Iroquois beadwork. They certainly didn't know that I'd ever been there. So I have a curious mind. My best friend for several years was an Iroquois beadworker by the name of Samuel Thomas, and I traveled extensively with him. The first time to Kenya, where we went to teach people there how to do beadwork so they would have something to sell to safari people. Because the missionaries had taken away those evil shining beads. And so he was at Easter Island too, and we went to dozens of museums between those places, trying to teach or inform museums about what they have. Because prior to our working with beadwork so extensively, people couldn't tell a Tuscarora piece from a Mohawk piece, from an Oneida piece, or whether it was made in 1800 or 1900 or 2000. But I used some seriation techniques that archaeologists use to date things, so that I was able to develop a series of how beadwork changed in the various communities.
I think we've covered most of the things, but there might be some
Got to
questions.
Atsuningo and beadwork. And
Started collecting it. No, she doesn't do the beadwork.
Could I suggest that we have a Zoom audience, and so for questions, let's pass the microphone around and
Right,
ask our
right.
questions. How's that? Can I take this one?
Sure.
And who was the last questioner? Right here.
Lillian,
I asked how many pieces of beadwork have been collected.
now, they're all cataloged. There are about 200, can you pass those out? About 200 pieces at my current exhibit at the Robertson Center, which is called well, you'll see. And I have about 500 pieces of beadwork that contain birds in them. So the exhibit, Beaded Birds in Haudenosaunee Art, are in various shapes. I've defined 80 different types. So I've got over 500 with birds on, out of a total of about 2,700 pieces. The next largest collections in the world are, one is in Birmingham, England, and one is in Ottawa, of about 1,000. Museums like the Smithsonian have, I don't know, maybe 100, but they've got several of my books, and many of the descriptions on the Smithsonian website are as per Dolores Elliott. Because nobody else can tell the difference. I love these birds. Here's an owl. And another bird, another bird. And after our bicentennial, this was made at Ganawagi, which is one of the Mohawk reserves up near Montreal. So it's in Canada, which is, of course, this is for the American market. But after the bicentennial, when flags became more important around the world, I guess, they started putting birds and flags on beadwork.
I may have been sleeping or something, but I think I missed how you and Tom met. Did you talk about
I
that?
picked him up at a bar.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for the question. Now, sometime in college, I met a guy, Angelo Lepolis, down in Endicott, and he said that he would help me find an IBMer, because the goal of co-eds at Hopper College was to marry an IBMer. And so after that first summer on the Archaeological Field School, Bob Funk took me to another excavation where we didn't have to turn in the artifacts to the State Museum. And so I had an artifact down at a bar in Endicott, and some guy down the bar came and identified it, and it was him. And that was before Harper had computers. And once a week, somebody came down from Cornell to teach a course in Fortran at Harper. And I joined the course. And so he taught me more about Fortran. And one of the other guys in the course, my sociology professor, said, and he programmed you right into his future.
That's my honky-tonk angel.
So Dolores, what we learned, in history class when we were in school was that the Europeans brought beads to America. Is that when Indian beadwork started, or did they have their own things they were using?
In 1492, a famous person came across with beads, and in his report of discovering whatever he discovered, he said, and the natives are much aroused, or something like that, with the beads. And so future travelers to North America brought beads, and they came into central New York, Iroquois, up the Hudson, up the Susquehanna, and up the St. Lawrence, coming into central New York. At first, they were used to decorate clothing and necklaces and such, and in the 1790s, they started making little purses and little pincushions. And that was the Senecas who worked until the mid-1800s, and for some reason they stopped, and the Tuscaroras took over and making lots of pincushions and stuff. And the Mohawks started again too. And we could pass this around. I love this piece. Most of the 19th century beadwork is on velvet and purple velvet. And purple's my favorite color. And this pincushion is unbelievable. It is just so precise and so nice. Not that I don't have hundreds, similar, but I really like this one. I can't quite figure out what this is. I was thinking that maybe it is something that a ring bearer carried during a wedding. Isn't that neat? Most of them are stuffed with sweetgrass or pine needles, something like a gift shop, because these are souvenirs to sell to other people. And when you go into a gift shop often, it smells piney or something like that, and these did originally too.
You know a lot of Iroquois, you have a lot of Iroquois friends. What is the politically correct thing to call them? Native American or Indian? What do they prefer?
Among the Iroquois, it's Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse. And when I started the International Iroquois Beadwork Conference back in 2009, international, because we've got 6 Iroquois nations plus Canada and the US, I called it the International Iroquois Beadwork Conference. They have forced me this year to call it the International Haudenosaunee Beadwork Conference.
Is there a question here?
Dolores, do you know the meaning of Atsaningo? What does that mean?
Nobody knows what the meaning of Susquehanna is either.
Isn't that interesting?
Now, Atsaningo, in my historical research in identifying this village that I excavated, Atsaningo is a territory that extends from the mouth of the Shenango River up to maybe where the Tiafneoga comes in. And there are many different villages in this area during the 18th century. There was a time when the nations, the tribes along the ocean were getting killed by Europeans. And so the Iroquois in the north invited them to take shelter under the big Iroquois Tree of Peace. And there was nobody living here in the Susquehanna and Shenango Valley at the time, because the Susquehannocks who had lived here before had moved out in the late 1500s, leaving our area vacant during the 1600s. It was a sort of a no man's land between the Susquehannocks in the south and the Iroquois to the north. And what was the rest of that question? The meaning of Atsaningo. Right. In my research, I could not find a meaning for it, but I found 50 variations of the word Shenango. There's Shenung, Shenungo, Atsaninki, Otsaninki, and 50 different variations. However, Colin Calloway, historian in New England, did research on Anaquaga, a sister city to settlement to Atsaningo, and he found 75 different variations of Aquaga, Anaquaga, Aquaga, 75 variations, because we've got Europeans coming through here listening to the names in their language, but you've got all these tribes, the Konoi and the Nanticoke and Shawnee and refugee tribes that are being moved in. So they have different languages. And of course, the Iroquois themselves, there are 6 different languages there. They're related, but they're different languages.
Dolores, could you tell us a little bit about your family, your parents, a little bit of that history?
Well, my mother was the daughter of the village blacksmith in Bainbridge. My father was the 3rd generation from Germany. There was a Neidlinger, my maiden name is Neidlinger. There was a Neidlinger beer company in Germany. My grandfather's uncle introduced the Singer sewing machine to Europe, and his office, as he was the supervisor of Singer in Europe, his office was on the top floor of this big building that we visited in St. Petersburg, and it's the Singer building. And I guess, he made enough money as from Singer that, he sent money and people to here in the early 1800s. So my father had a very large dairy farm, and it's really in the town of Guilford, and he had a large dairy farm, not compared to today. There was one other girl in my graduating class of 38 who married another farmer whose ancestor, by the way, came over from Germany on the same ship as my ancestors. But they have a farm in Oxford with 350 dairy cows and an equal number of dry cows. And they've got a barn the size of this room with little compartments where there's a calf in each one. This is a calf that was born last night. That was born yesterday. That was born the day before. Big dairy industry there. Wasn't anything like that 80 years ago.
I have 2 questions. One is, are any of these farms still in existence? And the other question related to it is, what moved you to have those aerial shots taken? I'm assuming you had to hire somebody with a plane to do that at the time.
I think there was probably a commercial guy that, approached my father to take the one back in 1955 or so. And I don't remember how we got one of ours
My experience,
approached by somebody.
Yeah, somebody you knew, the pilot.
Oh,
my experience in this area is that oftentimes there were aerial photographers who would go up and take pictures of everything and then go from landowner to landowner saying, do you want a picture of your property? That might be how it happened.
that could be, right.
The first part of my question was, does that, your homestead as a child, is it still there?
Oh, did you see the writing on the back of one of the photographs? I read it for the first time. It was written by my mother, sort of mourning the passing of it, because there was 3 houses on the farm, and the house I grew up on, the hired man's house, and my oldest brother's house that my father built in the 1940s. I remember that because there was a gangplank across the ditch around the house, and because I've always collected things. And I was, I don't know, 5 or 6. I had collected all these little pieces of wood, wood scraps, and I was walking across that gangplank and fell off into that construction ditch. And I have a scar from where my board came over in my cheek. My cheek broke open. So they sold the house and the farm in 1971. Another thing that happened in 1971, my parents moved to the house that my mother's father built back in the 1890s, the one with the artifacts in the backyard. So the farm was sold. Since then, the house that I grew up in burned down. The tenant house, the hired man's house, burned down. So there's one original house there that a relative lives on. But it's, nobody farms anymore. No cows, no chickens. I mean, there's still the barn with the 5 floors that the chickens used to live on. They had an elevator that went up to each of the floors. Life on a farm was really great.
Jan has baked us a yummy cake. Oh, no. Oh. Okay. Any other questions? I thought maybe somebody would ask if you have any native blood.
Oh, I have an appointment to have blood sample taken on Tuesday, but no. Maybe my mother, but she collected Indian things too. Yeah, I got by my habit of collecting things honestly with my mother. She had 300 and some African violets on shelves in all the windows in the house. And of course those books, and she collected lots of things. I collected stones and leaves and snake skins when I was a kid, and she had Indian weavings on the wall and stuff. So doesn't everybody collect stuff? Good. Collecting things is nice. It makes us happy. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you. Very good.
Did I entertain you?